Okay, meeting now streaming. I can see that now. So we'll get started. Thank you, everyone. I'm assuming you can all hear me. Yeah, nods around. Thank you. Right. So yeah, thank you. So welcome, everyone. I'd like to remind everyone about the microphones to turn them off when they're speaking, and also just to remind everyone about the chat function. It's been a little while since we've met last. For attendance and leaving the room, so to speak, and voting, because it is a public. The public can view the chat function. Okay, so I'd like to item one. I'd like to ask Joe to do a roll call on the councillors' names in the room, please.
Yes, okay, thank you, Chair. Rob Appleyard.
Present.
Tim Ball.
Present.
I've had apologies from Sarah Bevan. Colin Blackburn.
Present.
I've had apologies from Alison Bourne. Shelley Bromley.
Present.
Neil Butters.
Present.
Vic Clark.
Present.
Sue Craig.
Present.
Paul Crossley.
Against
Paul Crossley.
AGAINST.
Sorry, Paul Crossley. Come back to Paul. Jerry Curran. Chris Dando.
Present.
Jess David.
Present.
Tom Davis.
Present.
Sally Davis.
Present.
Doug Deacon.
Present.
Thank you. Winston Dogood.
Present.
Mark Elliott.
Present.
Michael Evans.
Present.
Andy Furs.
I'm here.
Kevin Guy.
Present.
Thank you. I understand we might have you with just sound only, Kevin. We noted that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a place with a video signal. Hopefully I'll have a video signal soon.
Okay, but we can do with just sound only if that's what you've got. Thank you. Alan Hale.
Present.
Thank you. Liz Hardman.
Present.
Steve Hedges.
Present, but video problems.
Okay, noted. Joel Hurst.
Present, thank you.
Lucy Hodge. Duncan Hounsell.
Present.
Sean Hughes.
Present.
Eleanor Jackson.
Present.
Grant Johnson.
Alive and kicking.
Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, same with me.
Good. Hal McPhee.
Present.
Ruth Malloy.
Present. Hello.
Hi, thanks. Paul May.
Here and present.
Matt McCabe.
Present.
Sarah Moore.
Present.
Robin Moss.
Yes, I'm here.
Paul Myers.
Present.
Lisa O'Brien.
Present.
Michelle O'Doherty.
Present.
Barrett Pancania.
Present.
June Player.
Present.
Vic Pritchard. Come back to Vic. Manda Rigby.
Present.
Dina Romero.
Present.
Mark Roper.
Present.
Richard Samuel.
Present.
Bruce Shern.
Present.
Brian Simmons.
Present.
Alistair Singleton.
Present.
Sean Stevenson McGall.
Present.
Andy Waite.
Present.
Karen Walker.
Present.
Sarah Warren.
Present.
Karen Warrington.
Present.
Chris Watt. Ryan Wills.
Present.
David Wood.
Present.
Joanna Wright.
Present.
I'm just going to go back and check Paul Crossley. Jerry Curran.
I'm present.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Jerry Curran.
Okay, so he's running late, but he'll be here in a minute.
Okay, thank you, Dina. And Vic Pritchard. Okay, and last chance, Chris Watt.
I'd
Okay, thank you.
understood Chris Watt had sent his apologies, so
Okay, not reached me, but I'll note those. Thank you, Paul.
thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 2. If people obviously join, they'll add the message to the chat, and then you can pick that out, Joe, as we go along.
Sure.
Declarations of interest. I'd like to ask Maria first to give us an update on where we all stand with the Bath and West Community Energy and the Keynsham Community Energy, please.
Yes, just for complete transparency, the council has a cooperative agreement with Bath and West Community Energy from 2011. The council has invested in 2 BWCE projects, and BWCE own and operate the solar panels in Lewis House, and the council buys this energy. BWC also own and operate solar panels on some schools' roofs in the council area. And the council also has a cooperative agreement with Keynsham Community Energy from 2018. This doesn't stop the council from discussing and agree and debating the energy bill, but obviously just to make the public aware that we have these interests as a council.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for that update. Joe, I'd like to ask whether there's any declarations of interest noted with yourself, put place with yourself.
Yes, there are. Thank you very much, Chair. I have an other interest on item 11 from Councillor Alistair Singleton as a member of BWCE, for which he receives interest on the shareholding, and also a director of Keynsham Community Energy. And we have sought advice from the monitoring officer, who's confirmed that it is fine for Councillor Singleton to move the later motion on the agenda on that subject. I also have the same on item 11, another interest from Councillor Alison Bourne, who's actually sent apologies, but it's okay. Councillor Sarah Warren on item 11, other interest, has shares in BWCE. Liz Hardman, the same item, the same interest, and Councillor Robin Moss on the same item as the chair of the board of Radstock and Westfield Big Local CIC. So those are the ones that I had noted to me, and you ask the rest of the councillors if they've got any others, Andy. Thank you.
Okay, I think we got Councillor Karen Walken.
Which, sorry, Karen Warrington.
Yeah, Karen Warrington, sorry, yeah.
We are different. Yes, I've got a small shareholding in Chelwood Community Solar Farm.
Thank you for that, Karen. Any other declarations of interest, please? No, but as always, when an item comes on the table, there's still space for you to make that declaration before the item gets kicked off. Okay, so we'll move on now. Sorry,
Andy, can I just interject, Andy? I've just noticed Councillor Matt McCabe. Let me just check the chat. He also has declared the same interest in BWCE as well, having shares. Thank you.
And I've got Councillor Paul May's raised a hand as well somewhere along the way. Councillor May, are you wanting to talk?
Could I seek from the monitoring officer, those declared interests, are they financial interests, and will they not take part in that debate?
They are not disclosable pecuniary interests because the shares are not worth more than £25,000, and they do not amount to more than 1% of the total issued shares. So they are they are personal interests, they are financial interests, but it does not require them to withdraw.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Thanks for that clarification. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've caught everyone now, so I'll move on to the next agenda item, please. So item 3, minutes from the 23rd of July. Can I have a mover and seconder that they are a correct record, please?
Propose.
That's Councillor Duggett, thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson McGall, thank you. Okay, so Joe, that's acceptable to you. We vote on that now, don't we? Yes, so I think this is just an easy show of hands, should we just show our hands to the screen, please? I think that's, Yeah, I think that's clearly carried. Thank you. Right, so item 4 on the agenda, announcements from myself. So what we've got here, I've got a number of ones I just want to quickly rattle through. So on behalf of elected members and the council, I sent a formal note of recognition in respect of 2 long-standing foster carers who retired after 42 years of service. I just wanted to congratulate them on their dedication to that duty, which I thought was quite impressive, 42 years. Also, I'd like to make it on everyone's behalf, congratulate the Roman Baths on their success at the Visit England Awards in August. They won a silver for a large visitor attraction of the year and a silver in the international tourism category. So appreciation to them and all the hard work that's gone into that from the staff and council generally. Thank you. Next item is I'd like to also congratulate Bath's Parade Gardens in scooping a coveted TripAdvisor Traveller's Choice Award. Not that I'm on TripAdvisor, but I'm told that it was quite an impressive achievement. So well done to mainly the Parks Department, I guess, for delivering that. And also Bath and North East Somerset has been commended in the prestigious National MJ Awards for its regeneration of Keynham's former civic centre. So congratulations to all the staff involved with that. So yeah, so that's good news. And finally, under this item, I'd like again, because of where we are with the COVID situation, I'd like to invite the leader of the council to give us a brief update on the latest COVID situation for the council, please. Briefly, if you may, Councillor Romero.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this update to full council. As you all will be acutely aware, we are still in a pandemic. The coronavirus is still with us and people are still falling ill and very sadly still losing their lives. We must all continue to do everything we can to prevent the spread of this disease. As Dr. Bruce Lawrence, our Director of Public Health, has continually stated, prevention is the best way forward until a vaccine is found. If there is an outbreak, then we have an outbreak management plan. And if you want to see this, please look at the council's website. This is a strategy that has been worked on and approved by all our strategic partners, including Public Health, the Police, the CCG, RUH, Curo, universities, and 3SG. But key to the plan's success is communication and joined up working with all of our partners. In recent weeks, we have seen increases in the number of cases locally. Because all of our agencies reacted quickly and together, the situation now appears to be under control and we have had no new spikes, but we can be certain that there will be more cases and it is likely there will be new clusters. So we must continue to follow the basic prevention measures, washing our hands, wearing a face covering, being socially distanced, as well as following the new rules as they are announced. The law is changing. From Monday, there will be no social gatherings of more than 6 people, either indoors or outside. Otherwise, there is a risk of fines. That is a simple statement put out yesterday by government, but the detail behind what groups might be exempt and who will be enforcing this needs clarification. And the council and our partners wait for that additional guidance so we can all be clear on our responsibilities. I know that there is also considerable concern about the return of students to our 2 universities and colleges, and want to assure everyone in the virtual chamber that the council and public health and educators have been working to ensure that there are plans in place, ideally to prevent any outbreak and to contain any outbreak that does occur, because we need to protect our communities. The universities and colleges have published plans that you can access through their websites if you want more information. Public health is our #1 priority, and different measures and ways of working are being put in place across council services. Some of these are directed explicitly by government, and many things are happening at pace. This means that sometimes normal ways of engagement are not possible. I apologise that this is the case and hope you'll accept my assurances that some form of meaningful consultation will always be undertaken as and when it can be, but it may not be before every change is put in place. I will do everything I can to communicate these changing situations to all of our residents and to you, but please let me know if key messages are not getting through to those that need to hear them. Despite all, the council remains positive about the future and the future of our area. We are working and supporting businesses in our immediate area and across the wider region, both on a West of England scale and even wider across a region which encompasses part of South Wales and extends to Swindon and into Gloucestershire and also to North Somerset. Government is keen to work with these larger regions on economic growth, and we are keen to promote this region nationally and globally for a time when the pandemic has loosened its deadly grip and life returns once more to more normal times. Please, if anyone has any questions, then email me. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for your attention.
That's very much appreciated, Councillor O'Meara. Just so for all elected members, if there's any questions arising from that, I won't take them now, but Dina has said that she will be happy to accept those via email or other means, and she'll deal with them as and when. But thank you for the updates, much appreciated. Right, so next item on the agenda for this evening is item 6 for Dave. Oh, there was no urgent business, that's right. So item 5 we skipped, there's no urgent business to deal with. I think we've addressed that really through other means. Item 6, I've got public speakers. So I've got David Redgewell first. Is David available and is he ready to speak?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
here,
David,
Chair.
well, we can see you and hear you, so off you go. We've seen your statement, so off you go.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, I really want to just continue the theme as normal, really, about the public transport, because under extraordinary times, it changes from month to month. I know that Neil and Joanna are doing an excellent job with the Weckham Air, but it's still hard work. So what I would really like to be seeing is just done a North Bristol review with the Weckham Air and put a new network in. I've come to the conclusion that we may very well need to look at how we serve South Bristol and Keynsham. And this is the area from Keynsham across to South Bristol and Whitchurch, to see if we can provide better links, because some of those links to South Bristol Hospital are now on a 2-hourly frequency, and that's quite unacceptable really, when the hospital at Hengrove says a great chunk of North East Somerset and facilities are there, particularly at weekends. Still got some routes like 37, which got 4 buses a day to Bristol via Kelston, which is in Baines, I remind everybody, and through Weston. And of course, we've still got very much reliability and punctuality problems on the 20, leaving school children delayed getting to and from schools for 2 hours the other morning. We are monitoring all of this. I know Neil's monitoring the D2 at the moment very heavily. I do put these concerns to the council. When the colleges come back and the universities, we need to be sure that with social distancing, bubble buses can run for the younger children, but the older children, if they're on service buses, need to wear face masks and also need to adhere to social distancing. So the network's going to be quite limited. We need to make sure with WECA now being in charge of the buses that we have adequate resources within the city and the city region to make sure that we can move the young people and people to and from work. So I think that's got to be a top priority of Baines and WECA to work together on that one. On light rail, I just want to make sure Dina made a very good point, and I support that we need to make sure that we're heart of the agenda if we are going to have a light rail rapid transit system that I know she supports, and the Mayor of Bristol, that we need to make that case through the regional transport boards to government before we lose that opportunity, rapid transit. So those are some of the things forward. And I also want to make sure that transport, and I may say this at one of the scrutiny commissions, is fully in the Metro Mayor's West of England economic strategy, which has not gone out for public consultation in Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire or Bristol. And of course, I always say it, North Somerset needs to join WECA. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for reminding us that North Somerset is not in WECA, David. Thank you very much for that. I'll ask the group leaders for any factual questions. So, Councillor Romero.
I'd like to defer to Councillor Butters, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's okay. Thank you, Dave, as always, for your hard work in the transport on the transport scene. You stated that in Bath, the top priority is to work with Wiltshire Council and Mendip Council with a council merger. I was just intrigued by this. What lies behind this? Are you talking about just transport issues or something much broader?
No, I mean, on transport with Wiltshire, I'm probably talking about transport, but Dina's mentioned the West of England Partnership and the Western the Western Transport Board, which is important. We work across the boundary. On the issue of Mendip, I'm not so sure on Mendip. There's a reorganisation of Somerset, and I just wonder whether Baines and Mendip would make a better fit in terms of a Greater Bath Authority. What's this review is happening, and it's about to happen with government white papers. So, and of course, the bus network goes out, and the rail network goes out into Wiltshire, and we know with the Swindon outbreak, of course, the cleanliness of the bus station is one of your top priorities, Neil. It's so easy, those boundaries. Bath has a travel to work area, which is not the same as Weckers. West Wilts, Mendip is very important to the Bath sub-region. I know we should forget that, so working across those boundaries. But I think Dina made that point. But I still think there might be some merit in a Mendip Baines merger in terms of going into Wecker as a bigger unit.
Thank you, David. We won't get into the debate about extensions of and mergers of councils. I think that's outside of this. So I've got Councillor Myers next as group leader.
No questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, David, for your statement. I just really wanted to agree with you on the cleanliness of the trains, especially running to London, as my son and daughter-in-law used them a week ago. So I agree that some standards needs to be met, and brought up to standard. But thank you, no questions.
And is it Councillor Moss next?
Thank you. Following on from Neil's question, I mean, I was curious about the merger with Wiltshire and with Mendip, but it's really following on from your reply to Neil, and you referred to the Greater Bath Authority. Is there something you need to share with us, with those of us North East Somerset, that we don't know?
No, it's something that, well, there is something to share, yes. I mean, there's no secret because it was actually in the public domain. Somerset County Council pressed a button just before the end of July, I think it was the 27th, when they had a full council meeting and voted to either come up with a unitary authority plan for the county of Somerset. And at that meeting, they were talking about Secretary of State becoming involved in a discussion about the future of the historic county of Somerset. There will be a consultation, I understand, both on transport and on local government that will fit the whole county of Somerset. The outcome of that will be some sort of consultation that Secretary of State sets in place. Maybe the two local MPs in our area, well, one of them at least knows a bit more about it because he has raised questions in the House of Commons on it. But I'm only reporting to some degree about the conversations that have been going on in the Shire of Somerset about the future of the north of the county and what may happen with a reorganisation. There may very well be new unitary boundaries. I think there's a reorganisation proposal. We should see what comes out of this consultation the government's about to start.
Okay, thank you, David. I think we draw the line there. I got. I think we draw the line there. Thank you very much for the minute. I don't want to get people excited. So I've got. David, you finish your speech now. I'll ask you to leave and then rejoin through YouTube. And I've got Mr. Grishoni as the next public speaker. Is he here and ready to speak?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, off you go. We've seen. Thank you for your statement. It's only just arrived though, so off you go.
Yeah, no, my apologies for that. It's really a statement to express the frustration that I found with a lot of my neighbours and friends and on the Nextdoor websites on recycling and household waste in Bath. So as per the brief you've now got, the facts as I've found it are that the Household Waste and Recycling Centre, the TIP in Bath, opened first time after lockdown in mid-March on the 18th of July. Those slots were only available on weekends and filled almost immediately, although when I first went, I was the only car there. They finally opened up 7 days a week from the 27th of July, which was 2 months after the vast majority of comparable councils. Keynsham opened at the end of May. We were the last authority of the South West to do so, and the government had requested them to be opened at the end of April, a full month earlier. So by the middle of July in Bath, we were the last city in England and Wales to have its own household waste and recycling centre open. And overall, we were even the last unitary authority to open. And all the others were in early mid-May, with invariably all their sites being open at the time, with one exception in Plymouth. We only had one site open until the 9th of July, some 2 months after most others, and Bath eventually opened on the 18th of July, which was pretty much the last in the whole country. And we now appear to be the last authority in the southwest, certainly southwest of here, to have an inefficient booking system, often no more than half full. And I was down there earlier today. And so the waste, as far as I can see it, goes on. Now, the 6 reasons that were given as to why Bath Tip could not be opened were as follows. Firstly, it was social distancing cannot take place there. Secondly, the site is dangerous and the health of workers is at risk, as that was a letter from Councillor Wood to a local resident in May. And then I was told by a former Lib Dem councillor, Adam Reynolds, that the site was being closed down for redevelopment and won't ever open again. And alongside a request to suck it up and go to Keynsham, which wasn't hugely helpful. We were then told by the Waste Department that the Lower Bristol Road was unsafe due to increased queuing, and that was cited as the only reason. And then we had a comment by the Waste Department saying that cars cannot socially distance, which we'll leave that one to one side. The last one, which is the most interesting, we're told by the CEO of Baines at a webinar on the 29th of June, cited as the only reason, that there were problems with having enough staff since the tips were advised to be open some 12 weeks ago, as they're off sick, shielding or isolating. So just looking at that, it was backed up by staff at the tip in August and another councillor who stated too many were shielding. The whole of Baines at that point only had 545 shielding out of our whole population, so that's unlikely. Too many sicks for 12 weeks? Hopefully not. Isolating for 12 weeks through conditions as asthma, it's possible, I guess, but pretty alarming if that's the case. Turning to recycling, before the administration took over, we had drastically improved and were the 18th best in the country, according to project manager Pam Jones. Now I think it can be virtually guaranteed that we will be falling behind. So the reasons people, or the people not being able to go to a local enough tip have been, firstly, they've had to pay to have larger items removed by the council, and that's unfair, I sense, and they often have not been collected on time or not at all. And I have got examples of that. The extra things going out in black bags will have caused extra landfill. Fly tipping with its obvious health and cost implications.
3 minutes is up.
Thank you. And the summary for me is when I went to report a missing bin collection, the Baines website said, please don't report a missing bin collection. So there are a number of questions that could be asked, but I recognise this is not a question asking session, but they are on this thing at the bottom. So thank you for your time, Chair, and the rest of the council.
Thank you, Mr. Grisoni. I've got some questions, just hold on there. So Councillor Romero, actual questions.
Yes, I would like to defer to Councillor Wood, but I'd also like to correct a statement that Mr. Grisoni made, which was about Adam Reynolds actually being a former councillor. To my best of my knowledge, he has not been a former councillor.
No, he was. Forgive me. He was nominated to be a councillor, but I then don't think he became one. So you're right.
Yeah, he was a
That's
candidate.
not my question. So I'd
Yeah.
like to defer to Councillor Wood, who is a councillor, to ask the question, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Martin, for your question. And unfortunately, I can only reply with a question rather than an answer, given the rules of this. Are you aware of the statement issued by Baines Council earlier this week about the sharp increase in recycling rates across Baines during the COVID period? And would you join me in thanking residents for when the guidance was to stay at home and not to leave the house unless essential, that they stayed at home, they stayed safe, and they recycled in much greater numbers from the curbside?
I did see that particular statement about increased recycling from the curbside, which is unsurprising because people couldn't go to the tip, I would say in answer to that. So, we can play with the stats as much as we like, but my overall point is to be the last city and unitary authority in the country is not really a badge of honour for an area that in the southwest that had the lowest rate of infections in the country.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on. Councillor Myers.
I'd like to defer to Councillor Paul May, please.
Thank you. Mr. Grisoni, I assume you're a local Bath resident. What do you think are the causes for the problems that you've outlined?
Well, it is an interesting question, and the council work hard, and whether they're councillors of any political persuasion, I don't care. A lot of people do a very good job on all sides, but it strike me that this was being overly cautious in an area where there was very little COVID infection, and the results of that were, I think, too much fly tipping to try and cite increased statistics of curbside increased recycling. It doesn't cut it with me, I'm afraid. So I sense it's just a over caution or just lack of leadership to make that happen when we should be gripping the local situation and giving council taxpayers best value for money. I just think it's not rightly done. There we are.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Martin, for your statement, but no factual questions.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Moss.
Yeah, please could you explain to me the ecological difference between curb recycling and tip recycling?
Well, I think to cite statistics to show that curb recycling has increased doesn't necessarily answer the question as to how much Bath and North East Somerset has increased its recycling with the lack of household waste and recycling centres over such a long period. So it's easy to grab one set of stats, but I guarantee if you look at the overall set of stats, we'll very likely be down from where we were. And to some degree, that's unsurprising. So it's a clever use of statistics, well done, but I don't think you can back it up with the full recycling statistics if they were available. And never mind the potential increase in fly tipping that I know has been the case.
Thank you for not answering the question.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much, Martin. Now again, as a member of the public, I ask you to leave the sort of internal meeting, but you're happy to join as a member of the public through YouTube.
No,
okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, everyone. Right, so we move on. So item 7 on the agenda is the planning reforms consultation. I'd like to invite Councillor Ball to move the recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Very much appreciated this evening. It's a paper that I thought should come to council. It's not one that had to come to council, but I looked at this paper itself, I looked at the consultation period and what the government was proposing, and I thought it better that council have its say on the response to government on the white paper on planning reform. It's quite a serious paper. It actually undermines much of the work local government does regard to planning. The response needs to be in quite soon, 1st of October, and there's a further consultation taking place after that on blue sky thinking of the government. We have more time to do that. If I take you through bits of the paper, then we can actually go on through. But before I do that, I think council can actually make many comments this evening, and we spend a long time on this paper if we actually needed to. There's plenty of time for members to make comments in the planning department and to myself after this meeting if need be. And they'll all be taken into account and put into a formulated response to government, which was signed off by the group leaders before it actually goes. So there's plenty of opportunity to actually deal with this. If we go on to 3.2 of the paper, you will note that the new assessment for Baines is stated to be at 24,000 houses. This is a mid-range figure only. The extreme figure is 27,800 odd, double our current need figures. We were expecting, with the JSP issues, to come in about 13,008 over a period of 20 years. These figures are unachievable. If the government brings them in early December, which they said they're likely to do, we immediately lose our 5-year housing land supply and could land up quite clearly in a lot of trouble by not being able to deliver housing, and we'd be open to predatory planning applications. A very serious issue there. If you go on to affordable housing and first homes, undermines the ability of the authority to deliver a lot of social housing and affordable housing. It's very expensive in this area, as we all well know. And the government's moving the guidelines from 10 to 40 or 50 dwellings, not specifying. This will rule out on majority of small sites any social housing being delivered whatsoever. And 3.6 gives permission in principle of the paper. But this means if you put something into a planning document, like a local government policy on issues on planning, you are assumed to have planning permission, and the government will expect you to grant it if it ever comes forward again. The zonal approach doesn't help us very much either. Once you identify an area fit for housing, fit for business, fit for special scientific interest, that is what it will be for. You can't change it very much at all. Look at the issues regarding SIL payments, deferred SIL payments, cause the council a huge problem, and also be able to get out of 106 agreements. It's not going to help us whatsoever. We have to make a very strong response. This paper is a very strong response, and the items in there are very strong. Can I thank Simon De Beer and the planning department for putting this paper together in one day, literally after I asked them to do it. It's a miraculous paper in such a short period of time. I do realise there are some areas you may want to toughen up in the paper. I'll be pleased to actually do so in your responses this evening. I'm going to therefore move the recommendations in the paper this evening under 2.1a and 2.1b.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. I've got Councillor Myers to second, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You can hear me, yes?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, off you go. Go ahead.
I'm pleased to second this motion. Whilst I acknowledge the national imperative to provide much needed housing, particularly for young people, and different types of housing for all ages, which is why the government is seeking to make changes to the planning system, it's nonetheless vital that we provide comment on the local impact here in Bath and North East Somerset of any proposed changes under this consultation. The challenge in Baines is that with so much greenbelt, the increasing housing numbers will inevitably fall disproportionately on areas where there is insufficient infrastructure to support them. As a result, we would request that the submission includes a strengthening, if anything, of the wording relating to greenbelt in section 311. And I welcome Councillor Ball's interest in hearing comments like this. What I would say is we do welcome the potential in the proposals for stronger enforcement in section 3.2a and the reference to the importance of neighbourhood plans. Like Councillor Ball, I'd like to thank officers for all their hard work. Otherwise, the detailed comments have really been made and noted, and I don't intend to repeat them, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Myers. Now, I've been informed of a amendment. I've got a Labour group amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct. Happy to move, as you can see in the paperwork. Hopefully, this amendment is being helpful in extending the reach of comments on this planning bill, because it's not just Bath and North East Somerset Council, not just Bath and North East Somerset that have got problems with these proposals. I think across the country, people are up in arms about it, because the underlying rationale, if that's a word that you can use with Boris Johnson's proposals, is that we need more housing. Well, in Baines, we have 3,500 existing housing consents, of which 1,700 have been built, so 1,800 outstanding planning consents. We've got an issue with affordable housing, and there's nothing in this bill about the definition of affordability being due to around price and not about income. There's nothing about building social housing, and there's also taking away a lot of the ability of local communities, certainly out in North East Somerset through their parish and town councils, to influence planning policy. So this is to encourage not only ourselves as a council to speak to our local MPs, and certainly I'd love to be seeing the response from our MP in North East Somerset to these proposals, but also the wider public as well, and parish councils. So I'm moving this this amendment or this addendum, and hope that that it'll be accepted by the administration.
So before I ask for a seconder, Councillor Ball, are you happy to or willing to accept this?
Yes, this is acceptable.
Thank you. And does that go for you, Councillor Myers, as a seconder? I'm not sure if I'm supposed to ask you or not.
I didn't think you were, but yes.
Well, you seconded the original, so yeah, we're all there. Thank you. Okay, so that becomes now the substantive. Yeah. So I've got a list of speakers. I've got Councillor Rigby on the list first. So Councillor, and then after that, I've got Councillor May, Sally Davis, Councillor Warrington, Jackson and Pritchard. So Councillor Rigby first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very, very supportive of what Councillor Ball and Councillor Myers have put forward in front of us. My specific concern is around 3.12, which refers to development management policies to be established at a national level. I believe fundamentally that the best decisions are made locally, and I'm sure I'm not the only councillor who gets a large volume of email around local planning decisions. And in this, I don't believe one size fits all. In Baines, we have Bath, which is a World Heritage City, and as Councillor Moss has been saying, we have a lot of green belt in North East Somerset. In fact, the whole of Bath is surrounded by it. How does that in any way fit with a national policy that's also got to look at authorities that either are predominantly rural or even exclusively urban? It makes zero sense to me at all. There is little commonality. So I think on behalf of our residents, we need to resist this most strongly, and that would be done in the name of local democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rigby. I've got Councillor Paul May, then Sally Davis. So Paul May first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support that comment. The figures that have been given by the government don't appear to have any logic in terms of how they've worked out those figures. And the issue for Baines in particular is because 70% of our area is green belt. I think that the idea that you can just take a number of houses and put them there as a simple solution is not the right way of going about this, because I think the report needs to be objected to, and I think it needs to be tightened up in terms of the green belt, because the only way that we're going to achieve this is to remove areas from the green belt. Councillor Ball has been very genuine in the way that he's supported and listened to people in my community, and I think that's really important in terms of moving this forward, because this does directly affect our communities that we all live in. And I think we need to be really, really persuasive as we can be to actually get the logic of how those figures of 24 to 27,000 have been worked out in the first place, because I've seen nothing in any of the papers that actually indicate how they've achieved the national figure, which they then translated down to a local level. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. So I've got Councillor Sally Davis and Councillor Warrington. So Sally Davis first, please.
Thank you, Chair. And my points are similar to what those have just been made in a way, in the fact that I think the way in which the numbers are being sorted out, the formula for the housing to calculate it, needs to reflect the areas more appropriately and needs modifying so it actually links the range of possible houses and developments that we could have, because the impact on the infrastructure and residents here with the numbers they're looking at will be colossal. And it's also closely linked with the greater clarity needed regarding the green belt. As Councillor May has just said, we're practically 70% green belt, so it means the areas for development are very limited and will be pushed into places which cannot take any unlimited numbers. Like Councillor Myers, I welcome the strengthening of the planning enforcement and the role of neighbourhood plans. However, there needs to be sufficient financial support for these to help their development, because we need to move forward and make sure that when we deliver housing or deliver developments within our authority, they are what are required by our residents, and they are going through the appropriate policies which would reflect what our area needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you very much. So I've got Councillor Warrington next and Councillor Jackson. So Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with all the previous speakers, but I also have an issue with the changes to the affordable housing numbers and the development numbers. In smaller villages, we could take more affordable houses, and they're required for as an example, agricultural workers. I too am worried about the national development management policies. One size does not fit all, and it doesn't reflect our local context. The other issue that I'm really a little bit passionate about at the moment, to put it mildly, is paragraph 3.31, the changes to use classes order. We have in my area a number of mining areas that obviously stopped in the second half of the 20th century. And those were changed into industrial areas, but they're on rural lanes that potentially couldn't support large large vehicles and indeed necessarily an increase in traffic. So I think we should look into that more, do some more investigation, and then give an appropriate and robust response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Appreciate that. So Councillor Jackson and Councillor Pritchard. So Councillor Jackson, please.
Well, it's very easy to give way to feelings of outrage and shout, that's it, there's no point in planning any longer and we might as well all go home. That feeling that Arthur Dent had in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when he found that a superhighway would be driven through his house, only he'd failed to see the piece of A4 notification paper pinned up in the basement of the council building. However, I'm glad to say that our officers have fought back with a thoroughly well-prepared statement of the facts and analysis. And what is probably the most important thing for us tonight, a clear statement of how the proposals will affect Baines. Having waded through the white paper and the consultation documents and the NALC position papers, I appreciate this very much. A number of things stand out. From the government, which has failed spectacularly to deliver IT for test and trace, and has caused the young people so much anguish over their A-level and GCSE results with a faulty algorithm, there is far too much dependence on IT technology in what they are proposing to do. Secondly, the new system will be more inclusive, they say, but actually will exacerbate the marginalization of those of us who cannot afford the appliances to download the various apps that would be needed, or simply cannot get a signal. Thirdly, by moving back the consultation process to the local plan stage and by making that a very crude one-size-fits-all process, it stops ordinary residents from going along to their village council to protest or to have a say about a building that's going to come up at the end of their road. Where will residents' associations go when they are protesting about HMOs? Or the Barthampton Meadows objectors, will they be heard? These proposals will create serious democratic deficit, as Arthur Dent will tell you. As the report points out, the emphasis on affordable homes for first-time buyers will drive out affordable rented properties, whether provided privately or by housing associations. I prophesy that just as the right to buy decimated our social housing stocks in the 1980s and increased homelessness, so the measures proposed about first-time buyers will make it more and more difficult to find affordable homes to rent. There's no time now to elaborate on how this is a developer's charter, but in my experience of 12 years on the planning committee, the problems are not the current system, but the glacial, sorry, can I finish a sentence? The glacial speed of planning inspectors, perverse decisions from the Secretary of State, who has far too much power already, and unfulfilled permissions, such as Councillor Moss has pointed out, not to mention land banking.
Thank you.
Just final thanks to the officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. So we've got Councillor Pritchard next, then Councillor Samuel. So Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, I'm speaking in frustration to the proposed number of houses, and now I've just learnt from Councillor Ball that the 24,000 could possibly reach 27,800. Now, there are limited places, as it's already been mentioned, where it's going to be possible to develop these, and supposition has it that it will be in Whitchurch, Keynsham and Midsummer Norton. But also there are villages that aren't in the green belt, and I speak of my own village, Bishop Sutton, that fell foul to the fact that the authority previously, when it never had the core strategy, was victim to 76 houses being built in one go under 2 applications that couldn't be refused. One the planning committee tried to refuse, but it was won on appeal. I walked around the village with the Peel inspector at the time, and he was remarking on the different design concepts throughout the village, and yet he sanctioned the development. So predominantly, the character of the village is determined by recent builds, which are off the shelf, which is already that our officers have commented in the response. So any future development will be of that same ilk. So will be a bland village. And incidentally, of all of the 76 houses, I can say categorically that all of those people commute to Bristol. 76 houses, what does it do for climate change? They all have at least 2 cars per property. So, and I'll just close by saying that the officers, I think, have done an excellent response, and I congratulate them, and I have high respect for the officers that drew this up. So again, my congratulations to them.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Samuel, last speaker, then I'll go back to Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's much to criticise in these proposals, as other members have said, but I just want to say a little bit to reinforce the points around the changes to affordable housing provision. Successive Labour and Conservative governments have eroded the ability of the public sector to provide low-cost social housing. The removal of grants, the privatisation of housing associations, the introduction of market standards into the production of what should be a public good. And now we see the final erosion of those principles. We already know that the affordable housing system within Bath, North East Somerset is very difficult to operate because of high land values. And now we see the removal of many of these sources of that affordable housing through smaller site development. This is a very, very sad and shameful day for this government. Successive governments have tried to remove the benefits of the planning system, which was once the envy of the world, and now it's a poor shadow of its former self, and very little break will exist on the inappropriate behaviour in the market by private developers pursuing profit. This is very sad, and one cannot have very much confidence in any proposals that come from a minister who sees nothing wrong at sitting at a dinner next to a developer who wishes to lobby him on the removal of contributions to Tower Hamlets Council. This does not give confidence. So, Chairman, I do hope that we put a good response through that really reflects, as Councillor Myers has said, our local perspective here, because we have a lot to be concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Councillor Ball, to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't take very long summing up. Every comment made this evening will be recorded and actually will be added to the paper and strengthen the paper up. A few pieces I will pick up as well. Several members have mentioned green belt and how it will be targeted by developers. We need to strengthen that. Very, very true we do. We must make very clear message to government that they're not building over every piece of green land. There's plenty of planning permissions in this area already on brownfield lands available, and we can actually do a bit easing to make sure they're actually implemented, not just sat on. I was very pleased to accept the Labour amendment because it comes at an opportune time. As I understand, the planning clauses issue is up to judicial review in middle of October, so a chance to get a good message to our MPs to get this sorted before it actually goes through there. We have very serious issues as well. Councillor Jackson raised very clearly the issues regarding people not being able to have a say on planning applications if the government gets its own way. We have a hard job in convincing government, but I understand other councils up and down the country are also complaining. I was at a WECA meeting the other day when a Conservative councillor, when I asked him if he read the government white paper, he said by the time he finished cursing the paper, the fourth time he managed to pick it up and actually read it. So no one's happy with the paper the government's brought forward, and let's get our swift response back to them today, and hopefully they'll listen to many councils complaining and complaining as they should do. I would suggest any council who has influence with their MPs in this council or any other council listening in tonight writes their MP regarding these issues. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. I need to move to the vote now. So just to remind everyone, what's on the table is the original motion, yeah, or the original papers, and it was a Labour amendment that was agreed to be subsumed into that to make the substantive. So I will presume, as always, that there is a majority in favour because that was moved and seconded by the administration. So those against, please, can you indicate on the chat, please?
Could I just clarify that it wasn't proposed and seconded by the administration?
Sorry,
you're quite seconded by the opposition.
You're quite right. Sorry, you're quite right, Councillor Myers. Thanks for that correction. Yes. So yeah, so I'll make a presumption that there will be heavily vote for this. So those against, please, can you make it clear in the chat? We should just wait a second or two, make sure people don't have finger trouble. And any abstentions, please? So, Joe, I think that is telling me that we've got a unanimous position on this paper.
I would agree. Yes, nobody's indicated against, so everybody is in favour and it's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, so I declare that a unanimous decision. Thank you. So in the spirit of screen time and everything like that, I'd like to propose just a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, get away from the screen, stay on mute. And it is in my watch, my clock says here 19:27, so it'll be 19:32 when we resume. Thank you very much. Okay, Mike, are you ready to start?
Very good, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mike. I think most of us are back. Appreciate that. Thank you. Right, so item 8 on the agenda. I'd like to invite Councillor Myers to move the recommendations, please.
Thank you very much. The Policy Development and Scrutiny Chairs and Vice Chairs Group historically agreed that it would provide an annual report to Council summarising the work of scrutiny over the previous year. And personally, as Chair of the PDS Chairs and Vice Chairs Group, I feel this is a really great opportunity to showcase some of the excellent work of the Council scrutiny panels. I hope you've all had the opportunity to look through this year's annual report and get a real sense of the positive work that's been carried out. This year's panels have been very active, contributing to some significant pieces of work, and have made great steps in demonstrating how scrutiny can have a real influence and add value to local decision making in the types of scrutiny work that they have undertaken. From scrutinising the call of executive decisions to developing task and finish groups, examining the Council's finances moving forward, particularly in the light of not only local issues but national ones, such as following the impact of both Brexit and the COVID pandemic. The panel members have worked with the Executive Cabinet members to provide both scrutiny and policy development input on a really wide range of important subjects on some crucial topics. On behalf of the 3 scrutiny chairs and vice chairs and all the members, I extend thanks to residents, councillors, businesses who've contributed, and specifically those council officers who've really supported as well, and without whose support we have not been so effective as a scrutiny function. I'm happy to propose this motion to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I've got Councillor Duguid, I think, to second.
Thank you, Chair. We've gone from 4 scrutiny panels and 1 Health and Being Select Committee in the last Council to just 3 scrutiny panels in this Council. The chairs and vice chairs believe the 3 panels have been challenged by the extra workload, but have coped, sometimes by longer meetings or additional meetings. Our brief is to be a critical friend and challenge to exec policy, to be a voice of concern from the public, to act as independent-minded councillors, and to drive improvement. The chairs and vice chairs believe this has largely been achieved. We expect to be fully stretched going forward in the current emergency, and I'm pleased to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Duguid. I've got I understand there's an amendment come forward. Is that true? And is it Councillor Hurst to move the amendment?
Yes.
Would you like to go ahead, Joel?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose an amendment to the paper noting this annual report on the work of the Policy Development and Scrutiny panels. The amendment is set out on our sheets and I understand has been circulated. And whilst welcoming the report and in particular the hard work that our PDS panels and our officers who support them do, I don't think we should rest on our laurels. I'd like to propose this small amendment to the covering paper. The amendment is in the interest of continuous improvement in the quality of scrutiny and that this council provides through its work on the panels. And so what we're suggesting in the amendment is that the council engages the Local Government Association to provide external peer review of our approach to scrutiny and policy, and in particular, the effectiveness of our current panel arrangements. In particular, what I personally would like the review to look at is, can our processes be improved? Are our agendas and workloads appropriate? Are there additional ways we can support the leadership of the panels and the effectiveness of the meetings? Do our PDS panels utilise all the tools that are available in the legislation for them? And are the actions and questions that are raised in the panels, are they effectively followed up? So I'd hope that such an external review will identify then how we can develop further and improve more the quality of the scrutiny that we then offer our council. So I move the amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. So, Councillor Myers, as the mover of the original recommendations, are you willing to accept that?
Yes, and I'd like to just make a point here that in actually presenting this, I do this in my role as chair of the Chairs and Vice Chairs group.
Yes.
As this amendment came in or was referenced to me before our recent meeting, I put this to the Chairs and Vice Chairs group, and there was support, and I believe I have a mandate for that. So I just want to be clear to all councillors that I'm not doing this as a Conservative, a group leader. I do this as a chair elected by the Chairs and Vice Chairs, and I very much welcome the opportunity for this peer review. So I accept the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I'd just like to also note then, Joe, as the mover of this originally, Paul, we just need to make sure that it's noted in the minutes that you moved it as the chair of the PDS group and not as that. If you're happy with that, just to make sure that that is absolutely clear in the minutes.
Yeah,
Yes, I'll make that clear. Thank you.
And I really would welcome that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, appreciate it. No, good. Okay, so so that's been original recommendations have now been amended. You've seen that in the pack in 2.2. That's now become the substantive. So I've got a list of speakers now. So I've got Councillor Pritchard first, then Councillor Samuel. So Councillor Pritchard.
Yes, I'd just like to say that if there's any doubt about the effectiveness and the value of scrutiny process, I draw your attention to the Food Poverty Action Plan for BAMES, which was implemented on the request of the full council. This was up and running before COVID and helped coordinate and improve the communication around food supply and distribution in BAMES. And I think you'll agree it was immaculate timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Samuel and Councillor Hardman. So Councillor Samuel, next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome this report. I think it was a very good report, a very clear summary of the work of the PDS panels, and I found it very easy to read and get the points that it was getting across. So I'd like to thank the authors of the report for the work in producing that. I'm also very pleased that the principle of continuous improvement has been accepted by Councillor Myers and his colleagues. I think that is a good practice to follow, and it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of that when it's concluded. I've been on the receiving end of 2 call-ins over the past year, and I actually welcome that challenge. It holds no fears for me, because I think that challenge to executive decisions, whether made by officers or by members, keeps us on our toes and makes for better government. So I welcome this report, Chairman, and I'm very pleased to see the amendment has been accepted as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Samuel. I've got Councillor Liz Hardman then, and then I'd like to draw a line, although there is space. But yeah, Councillor Hardman.
Right, I'm going to echo pretty much what Councillor Vic Pritchard has just said, and I'm pleased that this amendment has been accepted, because I think it will show that one of the panel that I'm on, which is the Children and Adult Health and Wellbeing panel, has been pretty effective. And where it's been effective, it's making a massive difference to many of our residents in BAMES. In tackling food poverty, or as we like to call it, food insecurity. So for instance, because of this action plan that's been presented, we've actually got £34,000 over the summer holidays to combat hunger, holiday hunger, which we wouldn't have done but for this action plan, but for all this being put into place. So we've done a massive kind of thing to stop holiday hunger. Also, there's been a 75% rise in universal credit between March and May, and so the demand for food is obviously rising. And this action plan is not just a sticking plaster. It has tackled the needs of hunger over the past few months, but it is not a sticking plaster approach. What it is, it's a long-term sustainable approach to tackle food poverty, or as we'd like to call it, food insecurity. And yes, there are short-term solutions, but really We want to see a structural change to make food poverty, food insecurity, a thing that not many of our residents would suffer from. So I'm using this as a plea. We've got funding for this action plan to be put into place for another 12 months. And I'd just like to say, we really would like it to continue for another 12 months after that. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Councillor Hardman. I've got Councillor Walker, then I will be drawing a line. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officer that put this report together. I'm the chair of the Climate Emergency Sustainable Panel, and I'd like to thank my panel actually for the input that they have given at scrutiny and looking at the papers. Scrutiny has been involved at every stage of the CAS, which is a clean air zone development. And we've looked at all the paperwork, we've listened to the consultation. So we've really scrutinised what has come to us. The climate emergency, again, the panel reviewed the action plan, working in March. Panel members wanted to ensure that residents could see the action plan and have a clear understanding of all the different pieces of work that's going on. So again, I'd like to thank my panel for the work and the input that they've given. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Councillor Walker. So back to the move of the original recommendations for summing up. Councillor Myers.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would note that I did work with the officer jointly to produce the report. So it was very much a report that I also think reflected the views of the chairs and vice chairs and an overview of the year. I see scrutiny and the role we have as really vital. In council, we're in our parties or not parties if we're independents, and we get tribal. And what I really have liked to see in the way we've tackled things in this recent term since the election is how very often what I've seen is members involved in scrutiny panels really working to look and be positive as well as positively critical and being constructive. And I think any administration that doesn't take on board comment and criticism that's constructive will be the loser. And so I particularly welcome Councillor Samuel's input and comment, because it isn't probably very nice having two of your decisions called in, but the process of it, I think the world was a better place for the discussions. And I think that's really positive. And no matter what parties people were in, there was a really good debate, certainly on those corporate call-ins. And I'm sure, although I haven't always seen it, that's what goes on in the panels. And so I welcome it and thank you for everybody's comment tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. So I'd like to move to the vote now. It has been amended, as I reminded everyone before, so we've got a 2.1 and 2.2. It is a PDS report, so I'm assuming that there will be a majority in favour of it. So therefore, any against, please? And any abstentions? Okay, Joe, I think we can assume again that is a majority, a unanimous vote for it.
Yes, that's right, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. Okay, so next item on the agenda, item 9, the Labour motion on parental leave policy. I think Councillor Johnson is moving this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to be moving this motion on parental leave. It came about principally around a month ago. I was having informal chat with the clerk of Poulton Parish Council, because like many of us in North East Somerset, we often sit as double-hatted councillors. And part of that conversation was talking about the need to vote on an extended period of leave for a councillor who was currently on parental leave. My first thoughts were, who am I to decide on an appropriate level of leave to be given to a new parent, and why on earth should I be voting on it as a councillor? Now, I understand the contradiction of moving this motion after those initial thoughts, but I strongly feel that this council needs to establish a principle. That principle is based on the equality of all of us as individuals to make our own decisions on when the time is right to start a family, regardless of our roles as councillors. It's also about stating clearly our commitment as a council to have a balanced representation from all demographics and age brackets, as this can sometimes put many individuals off standing as a councillor and standing up for their local communities. Now, I'm aware that there are legalities to be ironed out in the establishment of this policy, but I hope that this council can all agree to accept the principle that this motion sets out. And as we're on a bit of a run with voting unanimously, I would love to see that continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Johnson, just to be absolutely clear here, okay, there was a revised motion that came forward, just to remind all members. Yeah, and that is the one that you're moving, the one with the items 9 and 10 added to it.
That is correct.
Okay, so just make sure everyone's clear on that. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'm more than happy to second this. I'll do it briefly. I'd like to thank Grant for bringing this up and bringing it forward. I think we're all aware of how the attractiveness of being a council has been eroded over the years, and how we all talk about how council should be more representative of the larger community. And in terms of age, and the challenges of being a parent, as I'm sure many of us know, it's an important principle that we're setting here. As Grant says, this is a principle, and I appreciate that a lot of the devil is in the detail, and we look forward to officers' advice on how we implement it. I'm probably consulting with other councils who have adopted similar policies, but I will be brief, and as I'm sure we want to get on to the next motion, and hope that all council supports this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moss. So that's been moved and seconded. We've moved to the debate. I've got Councillor Evans first, then Councillor Hurst. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I think we'd all agree that younger people should feel able to put themselves forward for election like anyone else, but I have some doubts. I do wonder if these proposals are the right ones to achieve that. As I see it, there are two parts to these proposals. One is the idea of making parental leave available for councillors who are not office holders. That's the majority. I don't think parental leave will be necessary in this case because these councillors don't have any specific obligations apart from a very minimal attendance at council meetings, and even this can be waived by the council. I think it's probably better to leave the young parent able to contribute to meetings, bringing their valuable perspective of their particular stage of life, which I know happened in one particular case in Midsummer Norton Town Council. The question of responsibility for casework, which is included in the renewed Labour proposal, I think is a different matter. If a councillor can't do his or her casework because of illness or parenthood or whatever, I think that's a separate matter worth pursuing, but not under the umbrella of a parental leave arrangement. That leaves us with the remaining councillors who do receive.
I think we've lost Councillor Evans there.
Hello?
Hello, Councillor Evans. We lost you a second there.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back. I can hear you, yeah.
That leaves us with those who do receive special responsibility payments. None of them was elected to carry out these responsibilities. If their party forms the administration or has the right to hold an office, the party puts some of its members forward to do that. As we know, different parties have different arrangements for deciding which councillors should carry them out. Some have a democratic process to elect them. Others elect a leader and then have him or her appoint individuals to responsibilities. Whatever the method, this is not a job with qualifications, interviews, a career structure, or employment rights. It's a way of implementing the policies which the party put forward in its manifesto. Fairly recently, Eric Pickles made being elected to serve as a councillor rather less like employment by removing pension rights for councillors, which I think was the correct thing to do.
1 minute.
These proposals, by contrast, try to make political office much more analogous to employment. I think this will be a cultural shift, which this country has not yet decided to make. So I think we should wait until it does so before burdening our council taxpayers in Baines with paying the same allowances twice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Just to remind everyone that the amended motion included things like a request that a constitutional working group consider this matter. So many of those items that you raise, you can probably pick up again within that consultation working group. So I've got Councillor Hurst next, and then Councillor Romero.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to speak in favour of the motion, but I guess my reflection is that this motion is one small step in dealing with a much larger problem. And our problem that we have in the UK is a democracy that's not fit for purpose. It's a democracy that it was designed and is fit for the Victorian age and not the modern age. It's a democracy where our MPs, our councillors, our parish councillors do not reflect the populations that we serve. So the Lib Dems have had a long tradition of trying to campaign for reform of our politics, a modernisation of our voting systems, a system which actually enables a support from people from all walks of life to engage in politics, whether they're in full-time jobs, with families, without families, and that they get the kind of statutory support for representation of their communities. Significant reform is required, and that really is the big issue. Fair votes, abolition of unelected House of Lords, statutory protection of our elected representatives, tackling the oversized lobbyists, big business and big union influence on our politics. All of this has to change for us to really have a politics that represents the people that we vote for us. So all of this is long overdue, and it's just a shame that our existing system of predominantly the two strong parties squeezing out reform of electoral reform and political reform is really put us in this situation. So while I support this small step forward, I think there's a much bigger thing that we need to kind of engage with. We need to, rather than rearranging the deck chairs of the Titanic of our politics, we need to actually radically change it and get on and reform it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst. So I've got Councillor Romero, then Councillor Warrington.
Thank you, Chair. So in a similar vein to what Councillor Hurst has said, there are a number of factors that influence whether someone stands for office or not. And I believe that as councillors, as the administration, we must do what we can to ensure that the role of councillor is as attractive as possible. There is a huge amount that weighs against people's standing, and that runs across a number of issues that have been raised in other meetings, including the remuneration package that is available, as well as a lack of sort of real stability in the role. Councillor Evans mentioned that you're not interviewed for this role. Well, I would disagree, actually. I think that you are interviewed for the role by your residents. You knock on their door and you ask them to judge you and to see if you are worthy of the position. There are very few roles where you get interviewed by quite so many people. My personal experience of with my third child meant that I had to rely extensively and exclusively on my group at the time to provide the support so that I could spend some time with my baby. And I think in actual fact I only missed one full council meeting at that time. I think it would be preferable to actually have a period of time that is agreed and that is more in line with normal employment rules. And so therefore, as I said, this administration is very happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Romero. So I've got Councillor Warrington and Councillor Jackson. So Councillor Warrington, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really want to see a good range of diversity across the council, although I'm not convinced that this is the way to go for the number of reasons. It's a really complex issue, and it probably isn't a role that people do consider off first bat. As a female councillor, my experience is I've been harassed, I've been verbally abused, and I've received obscene phone calls. Now, because of my professional life, I have built up a certain amount of resilience, and I don't think everybody can or wants to do that, especially when they're dealing with family issues. I managed to bring that into my public life, and I don't think a lot of people might want to do that. In addition, it's been mentioned before, this is a vocation. It's not really a career, it's a vocation. And I think that there are other opportunities out there for people to earn a living that will let their families survive. And you certainly can't survive on a on the ward councillor's allowance. I'm nervous about asking our taxpayers and our residents to give more money potentially to cover the costs of these when it isn't necessarily, in my view, a primary constraint for people entering into standing for ward councillor. We are at an unemployment and financial crisis across the nation. I know that a lot of people are being made redundant, and I just think it's very difficult to go to our residents and ask for more money for councillors. And lastly, and it has been touched upon, importantly, there are legalities surrounding the relationship between the members and the council. We're not employees, it's not insurmountable, but it would be a challenge to overcome when I believe we have other priorities. So I can't support this motion and I will be abstaining. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warrington. Thank you very much. Councillor Jackson, then I've drawn a line. So Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just been filling in my tax returns. And you know, the funny thing is, HMRC considers that my councillor's allowance is taxable and treats me as an employee of the council. So, you know, the previous speakers can argue with HMRC if they want to, but I don't think I rate their chances very high. Now, we have to look at this in several different ways. I would agree that people, well, most people who stand for election would not do it for the sake of the money. It is indeed a calling, and you usually have a drive and a purpose in becoming a councillor. However, you may have this great vision and dream of what you want to do to improve Bath and North East Somerset Council, but you might not be able to afford to do it if you have a young family. And I have pointed out to suitable candidates who I'd love to see get engaged that there is a childcare allowance, but we have to go a step further back and consider the issue of parental leave and so on. And this motion is not about spending sums of the taxpayers' money. It's about considering the options and bringing it before the Constitutional Committee. And I very much hope we will, because I think it will send out a signal about the, can we say, the user friendliness of the council to younger people. And we desperately need to get younger people on board working with us. As I, who've just passed my 71st birthday, we've got to get a better demographic, as has already been said. It's only a very small step, this motion, but it's a huge signal to people out there that we will be sympathetic if you've got a small family, if you a young family, and if you haven't completed the family yet. So I would urge everybody to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So we've had that moved and seconded. Just to remind everyone, the motion that is on the table is the one with items 9 and 10 added. I'd like to move to a vote. Listening to the debate, I think there's a majority in favour, but I can always be proven wrong. So we'll assume that there's a majority for this. So I'd like to ask those. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Sorry, yes, you can sum up. Sorry, Councillor Johnson. As long as you're brief.
Yeah, yes. Very brief, very brief. I agree that this is only one small step forward to equality reform, and is something that I was surprised wasn't already in place. It's also a step away from the draconian views of people like Councillor Evans, which he so clearly laid out. I would also say that this isn't about our own opinions on what someone should and shouldn't do. Equality works differently to that, and this is about individuals having the right to make their own decisions and having a choice. The only other thing that was brought up, and I'm not sure really how this motion relates to to PR. But I guess the Lib Dems will keep banging that drum, and that is all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Right, so we'd like to move to the vote here. As I was explaining, I think there's I'm assuming there's a majority for. So those voting against, can they make their vote clear on the chat line, please? Those against? I've got some abstentions, but it's okay, not to worry. We'll count them in, as long as we're clear. So, okay, yeah, so we've got abstentions coming in. So all those voting to abstain, please? Okay, I think there's about 11 abstentions. Is that correct, Joe?
I would agree. I've seen 11 abstentions. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that motion is carried. Thank you ever so much. So that was so many votes for and 11 abstentions. There were none against that I recorded. I saw.
Can we just check? Just give a little bit of time because in case anybody did want to vote against, I didn't see any, but just double checking.
Okay. No one's shouting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, thanks for that, Joe. Okay, so that motion is carried. Thank you ever so much, everyone. So item 10, a motion, Conservative motion on restoring council service levels, please. Councillor Myers.
Thank you. I'll just get my screen up. Yeah. Okay, thank you. The aim in putting forward this motion is that in the past, councils always sought to consult on service changes. But naturally, under COVID-19, this hasn't been possible. So it's not clear what services have been amended, added or deleted. This is not an ideal position, as in order to ensure continued patience of residents and support in general for our valiant staff providing services, I think we need to communicate better. And it's not just about money, but good customer service. The problem is that as services are resumed, I've received, and my fellow members have received, a huge number of complaints from residents that services are not been fully restored and they don't find out until they face an issue. For example, with this missed bin collections, the council website simply says, please don't report missed collections. As so much of the council agenda through the years focused on national issues, I really wanted with our group to raise these local comments from our actual residents and to highlight this. And I've asked a number of them to watch tonight to see that we've actually done this. And this is why we've called it to the attention of council. It's a public servant to honour its obligations to residents as soon as possible by restoring the pre-COVID-19 pandemic frontline service levels as a matter of urgency, all its outward facing services, and that scrutiny be asked to review this in due course. What I find very strange is that whilst I'd understood the services were being amended and changed without consultation because of COVID-19 operational reasons and safety reasons, talking to members across the chamber since our motion came out, it's clear to me that people think the government's responsible and it's about funding, which is news to me. So bins are not apparently being collected because of the virus, but because of costs. Also, there's a whole perception of the council to consider. Whilst I acknowledge the need to protect staff, many are out working in the front line whilst the Guildhall front door remains firmly closed. What message does this send to the community? In terms of defining the list of services, I really truly welcome the list provided by officers today. It didn't include missed bins and a number of other services which matter to local residents. But this, I acknowledge, is the challenge when changes are made without consultation under a pandemic. All we want to do is voice the concerns of residents in the spirit of being open. Otherwise, so in the interest of being an open and as well as a listening council, I'm pleased to propose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor May.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I wish to second this important motion. Recently, as a councillor, I've picked up the frustration of our residents and our own staff that they feel they're now using COVID-19 as an excuse for not delivering the services the public need or indeed expect. My praise goes to our dedicated frontline staff, such as our highways teams and refuse collectors, who have kept key services going under difficult circumstances. But when things have gone wrong, as they often do, the public are told they can't complain. Tourism is a key for the community's economy. So why has the tourism office been closed, the Fashion Museum and the Victoria Art Gallery all closed in terms of our website? My main concern relates to the disadvantaged in our community who often do not have a computer. Why, when shops, cafes and other services are available within the community, do we not provide for cash payments and self-service kiosks and one-stop shops properly? Indeed, if you try to contact Council Connect in the offices, I'm told you no longer seem to be available. There is a telephone on offer offering contact with some officers and only essential welfare services. I'm told the council has set up a letter, only one letter during lockdown to vulnerable residents, and that was a letter complaining about the costs of the services. Our libraries are still shown on our website as virtual and the mobile library stopped, yet in Bristol they've managed to reopen their libraries. The public have been supportive throughout the lockdown, but are increasingly complaining to me, and I'm sure to others, that the changes to services have been made without consultation and stopped when people are still expected to pay their council tax. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. Now, I've been informed, well, we've all been informed of an amendment on the papers, but I've been informed of a second amendment. I take the first one first, which is the Liberal Democrat amendment, which I believe is going to be moved by Richard Samuel. Is that correct?
Correct. Would you like me to start?
I'd like you to, yeah. So you need to start and you need to move it, and then we need to second it.
Thank you, Chairman. When I saw the text of this motion before Council tonight, I thought I had entered a strange parallel universe where COVID-19 had never arrived in Britain. In that strange space, economic activity had not fallen by 20%, thousands of jobs had not been lost, businesses had not been forced to close or go bust, test and trace was a concept no one had heard of, and few people knew about PPE. And at that time, Bath North East Somerset Council was a fully funded council with an ambitious programme of activity agreed in the budget in February. Well, of course, we know that no such parallel universe exists. And the reality is that in common with millions of our fellow citizens, this council has faced a net budget shortfall this year of around £40 million and has had to make cuts in the year of £20 million to balance the books. Promises made by the Conservative local government minister have failed to materialise when he said in March that local government should do whatever it took to tackle the pandemic and the government would fully reimburse councils. Well, some grants have been made, this is true, but for Bath North East Somerset, substantial losses in commercially generated income and leisure services have not been covered by the government, amounting to millions of pounds of lost income. Now, of course, the council services have been affected by the government lockdown, but it is important to record that whilst many services have changed their mode of delivery by necessity, few have stopped entirely. As has been mentioned, it is to the credit of officers that key services such as refuse collection and recycling continued largely unaffected. And the fact is that the vast majority of our services were still delivered, even if some were impossible to do so because of government restrictions. Now, we would all like to see a return to normal,
but this cannot be guaranteed. Our work to revise financial projections over the next 5 years shows that the effects of the pandemic will reach many years ahead. And I do not expect, thank you, I do not expect the Council's finances to return to their pre-COVID level until 2025 at the earliest. Details will be set out to the Cabinet in October in the new medium-term financial strategy. Now, as adequate finance underpins the provision of all of our services, members can see that in seeking the open-ended commitment set out in the Conservative motion is naive in the extreme and cannot possibly be agreed to at this point in time. Our amendment therefore seeks to set out a realistic basis for future aspirations rather than establishing a rose-tinted view of the Council's future finances and services. Now, unlike our Prime Minister, I prefer to deal in hard facts and not promote daft moonshot ideas that can never be attained.
Time is up.
Designed for the next day's press headline. I move the amendment, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. So that amendment is moved. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Warren?
Yeah.
Yep.
Off you go. You not ask if I accept or reject?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Myers. Are you willing to accept that amendment?
I am here, remember. No, I don't, but basically.
No, that's fine. No, that's all you need to say. Thank you. No, okay.
Put the rules in there then. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Warren.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies reported last month that public health and the economic effects of COVID-19 are creating a perfect storm for councils' finance, simultaneously increasing spending and reducing incomes. The costs of social care provision have increased due to the need for PPE, whilst councils have new responsibilities, housing rough sleepers, supporting those shielding at home, helping with test and trace services. All this at a time when our income in Bath and North East Somerset from our commercial property portfolio, heritage attractions like the Roman baths and car parking has been wiped out. Many residents and businesses are struggling to pay their council tax, and government promises to make good our losses have been reneged upon. Another of their frequent U-turns that seem to occur daily. Baines is one of the councils whose finances have been most impacted as a percentage of overall income. Nationwide, the IFS projects in-year financial pressures of over £7 billion, and that's before billions more in council tax losses are accounted for. Government has provided £5.2 billion in support, leaving a £2 billion coronavirus hole nationwide, and further pressures loom in coming years as we can't be certain that takings from rent, heritage, or even council tax receipts will pick up for quite some time. In this exceptional context, it is an enormous credit to council staff that they have stepped up to the unprecedented challenge of continuing to provide the usual services to households around Baines, despite in some instances concerns about their own and relatives' health, whilst innovating to provide some services in new ways to minimise infection risk, and whilst building new services almost from scratch to respond to the pandemic. For example, the Compassionate Communities Hub that has connected vulnerable individuals with support. I want to thank them for their efforts. They have gone above and beyond to keep things running and to protect those residents in greatest need. I did not enter politics to cut public services, and it is with huge reluctance that this council administration is being forced by national government to shave further millions from budgets already slimmed by 10 years of austerity. However, we will attempt to do this with compassion, whilst continuing to find new and innovative ways to keep services running, and also delivering on as many of our manifesto commitments as possible, including important measures to counter the climate and ecological emergencies. I commend the amendment to council.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. So we have a motion on the table that's now got an amendment. The amendment was all circulated beforehand. I've got 3 speakers down. I just want to make sure whether these speakers want to talk on the amendment or the substantive. So I've got Councillor Appleyard, Moss and Jackson.
Substantive.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Councillor Moss?
Substantive, sorry.
Okay, no, that's no problem. And Councillor Moss. Councillor Jackson?
I'm quite happy to, well, I'll be speaking on the amendment, but obviously referencing the initial motion, because that's what the amendment's about. I mean, when I saw the motion, I thought it was bizarre with the way that it was a rewrite of history.
No, Councillor Appleyard mentioned. Sorry, just pause there, Robin. Sorry, Councillor Appleyard said he was going to speak on the substantive, and so did Councillor Jackson. So
I'm happy to
Councillor
wait.
Moss said he's regular. Well, yeah, you're still on my list, Rob and Eleanor. Okay, sorry, Robin. I destroyed your flow then.
It's all right. As long as Joe resets the clock for me, then I'm fine. As I say, I thought the motion was bizarre and it rewrote history, and I thought the way that it was that the moving speeches, the moving and sentence speeches, were even odder. It's almost as if nothing had happened from the 23rd of March. It's funny as well how it was a focus on what services couldn't be delivered, and I'd remind the Conservative group that 95% of our residents took notice of the advice to stay home and stay safe, and the last thing they wanted to do was council services to be doors to be open and the rest. So to change history in that way is odd. I think it was less than edifying earlier today to see that one of the Conservative candidates from last year's election questioning whether or not some officers weren't able to work because they were shielding. They questioned the figures and said that they thought it was unlikely. And I think, as Sarah was saying, there's no mention of council officers going out delivering food parcels. There was no mention of council officers going out picking up prescriptions. No mention of council officers helping to coordinate volunteers delivering hot meals across the area. And I think that council officers and people who work for the council should be absolutely congratulated with the way that they dealt with the pandemic, with the crisis, and certainly this motion, this copy and paste from Bojo's press releases is something that's an absolute disgrace and does not belong in this council chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. So that is my last speaker on the amendment. So I'd like to move to the vote on the amendment. The amendment is amendment number 1, the one in front of you on the papers that we received earlier today. Item 10, which has got the scoring out, which starts paragraph 2 as notes rather than believes, just so we're all looking at the right piece of paper. Okay, so it's a Liberal Democrat amendment. I'm believing that it will be a Liberal Democrats for. So those against, Paul May. Thank you. Paul Myers against. Yes. So those votes against coming in. Thank you very much. They're still coming in, so we'll hold on a minute, Joe. Okay, so
I make that 13 so far against.
13, yes, 13 against. Okay, abstentions, please. I'm not seeing any, so I shall. Okay, no abstention. I'm not seeing any abstentions, so I will declare the amendment from the Liberal Democratic group as carried.
Yes, I agree with you, and it's just been pointed out that there was a vote twice, but it doesn't change the result, so it's actually 12 against.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep. Thank you.
That's why when it's a close thing, it's it's complex, it's difficult. Yes, demonstrates it. Okay, so I declare that the Liberal Democrat amendment has been carried and therefore becomes a substantive. I now have another amendment on the table. It came in late. I was advised to take it. I just want to make this point quite clear. I was advised to take it because it's the Constitution informs me that I need to, but it makes life very difficult. And that's, I just want to make it clear, the amendment is quite clear in this case, so it's not overly complex, but it does make life very difficult for not just those of us trying to run the meeting, but all the members in seeing all these bits of paper flying around. When we're in a council chamber, it's a lot easier. And we're not, and that's anyway. I've taken the amendment.
Can I make a point? Can I make a point as leader of the Labour group that we produced this amendment because we saw your amendment fairly late. It wasn't the intention to put it in late to either confuse or to complicate. It was just simply the timescales. And but appreciate what you're saying.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So I've got the other speakers there parked already. I've got Councillor Dando to move, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as you say, it is a fairly simple and non-controversial amendment. So I'm hoping that everyone will be quite happy to support it. And unlike the movers of the motion, I'm not going to attempt to gaslight the council into believing that things are absolutely wonderful and can get back to normal as quickly as possible, because as everyone is well aware, despite what our beloved government says, this virus has not gone away. The infection rates are rising, and we need to do everything we can to keep our community safe and to keep the staff that work for this council safe. So I make no apologies for the actions that the council took, and I think our public have well understood the challenges that the council have faced, and it's sad that some people want to pretend that nothing's happening out there and we should get back to normal, and it's only a lack of will that's stopping us from getting back to normal. But anyway, on to the amendment. I think we have previously identified that the council before the pandemic had a financial difficulty in that it had and passed, in our view, an unsustainable budget last year, a point that we made at the time of the budget setting. But now the pandemic and the government's lack of funding for the promises that it made to local authorities has made that problem worse. And so rather than provide cover under item 3 for the cuts programme to come, we think we should remove that sentence, but instead should put the blame firmly back where it lies and allow those residents that Councillor Myers has brought along to the meeting this evening to understand that this is predominantly a problem of government underfunding of local authorities and of the pandemic, and therefore that we should go back clearly, and Councillor Myers can pass this on for us too, to the government to say that it is unsustainable for the council to continue to make cuts to services that our residents rely upon, and that we need a better solution. So I'm happy to move that amendment, Chair, and end off.
Thank you, Councillor Dando. Now I've got to get this right. Joe, please pay attention I get this right. So Councillor Samuel now has got this substantive, so therefore I've got to ask Councillor Samuel, whether he will accept this Labour amendment.
Yes, that's
right. No, I will not. No, I will not, and I wish to speak to it.
Okay, I will put you down as a speaker in a second. So, Councillor Dando, do you have a seconder? Oh, I've got Councillor Jackson's put a hand up. I've taken that. Councillor Jackson is the seconder. I'm happy to take that. So, now I've gone back to the original list now. Councillor Rob Appleyard. I'm presuming that you're going to speak on this one now.
I'll hang on to this.
Go on, get in there now.
Substantive. Well, if you insist, then Chair, I will.
Yeah, let's go for it now.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, I'm actually amazed about this. I mean, there does seem to be a little matter of a pandemic that's actually paid havoc, not only with our society, but also with our council finances. And I don't really know what the Tories have been doing. I will try and sort of keep this very simple. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to hold a portfolio position for the adult services, the safeguarding, all the public health and everything. And they have been absolutely phenomenal over the last 4 or 5 months in the way they've adapted and responded to the challenges of how they've actually had to connect with many of our communities. It's brought some interesting elements into it where we started to use technology more, and that's something hopefully we'll retain. But there's not many of our people that have actually suffered because of a lack of support from our officers. And our primary supplier of about 200 of our services, Virgin Care, they really stepped up to the mark and found innovative ways to actually reach out and make sure those that are in need are continually being looked after. I think Councillor May's mentioned something about the why places like the art gallery were closed and everything like that. Well, the simple reason is we've got a big black hole. We're not getting the money that the government promised us at the beginning. And unfortunately, the art gallery does cost us money. So we don't want to add to that debt by having it open. It's a lovely thing to have open, and we're very proud of it. But we can't afford to have that sort of cost adding onto our debt at the moment. I don't think I really want to add any more than that, except that the one thing that we did wrong, or we didn't do enough of, is possibly inform the Conservative Party or group of actually all the good work that we were doing. We had a head down, we were doing the work, we were making sure that our authority, our residents were being looked after, and also supporting things like the community hub. Now that's a phenomenal piece of work where all of our third sector groups came together with the council, with Virgin Care, and looked after many of the most vulnerable people in our society. And some of the figures that come out of there has been astounding. I mean, sort of 900 volunteers come forward, and the figure that really surprises me and everything like that, nearly 20,000 frozen meals distributed by us and our partners in there. And these are all going to the most needy people in our society. So yeah, sometimes people don't answer the phone as quick as we want to, and maybe you can't get into the Guildhall, but that doesn't matter to a lot of people. What does matter is they're being looked after, and we've done a bloody good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleyard. Councillor Jackson, please. I'm assuming you want to talk on this now.
Yes, please. I was just checking I was unmuted. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's a sad fact that the Labour Party is rather inclined to stick labels on people. They say, oh, Brownite or Blairite, and no doubt in the future they'll say Starmerite. Well, I'm proud to be a Wilsonian pragmatist in the school of Harold Wilson, that you get things done and the ideology will support or not. And this is what the drive of the Lib Dem amendment is, I think, to appreciate what has been done. And it's certainly what the Labour amendment is now aiming to do, to bring things down to earth. I was very sorry to see the Conservatives' original amendment, because I thought it would do nothing for council morale, and it ignores the facts, which Councillor Appleyard has just illuminated. But we should also remember the heroic labours of our teachers, educational ancillary staff and officers, not to mention volunteer parents, so that our schools went back satisfactorily. Our planning department has proceeded with hardly a glitch, thanks to the long hours that the officers have devoted to preparing for COVID-secure meetings and processing applications. So instead of the original motion, which I hope is now going to be thoroughly buried, I think we should be celebrating what has been achieved, and that's why these amendments have come in, I hope. Officers have gone above and beyond their own roles, and they've provided emergency services, and some of them have been acting as volunteers as well in their spare time. So I really think we should make a note of this and express our appreciation. They covered for colleagues who are sick, and they showed commendable flexibility, changing roles and backing each other up. It's already been said that as responsible employees, we have to consider first and foremost the safety of our employees and of the members of the public. So I would just like to conclude by saying I have noticed that a new slogan has crept onto the bottom of emails and council stationery: improving people's lives. I think that's very patronising. We help them to have because they cannot help themselves. I think we should have a new slogan: a community, that Bath and North East Somerset Council is a community to be proud of. And I hope you'll all support the Labour amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So I've got Councillor Samuel to speak to the Labour amendment, then I'll be asking Councillor Dando to for a right to reply on the amendment. So Councillor Samuel.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important why I explain why I'm not prepared to accept this amendment, and why I hope my group will be voting against it. There are two arms to the amendment that Councillor Dando put forward, and I'm going to take them separately. The first, it raises the words, means that difficult financial and service decisions will need to be made following the COVID pandemic. I'm afraid that is self-evident, and for the Labour group to ignore that reality is naive in the extreme. There will need to be difficult decisions made on the budget next year, because income losses to the council will continue next year, and that means choices will have to be made, whether Labour members like it or not. The second part of the amendment put forward by Councillor Dando refers to seeking to pass off blame, if I see it in a not particularly subtle way, for the last 10 years, and I'm sure 10 years is not a coincidental period of time. The reality is that local government finance has been undermined by Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrat administrations over the last 20 to 25 years. And that is why local government is struggling. I'm afraid all politicians at national level have responsibility in the weakening of local government finance. But I must take him to task for his comments that we went into this financial year in difficulty. Absolutely, we did not. We set a budget that included significant growth to meet manifesto commitments and contained adequate levels of reserves as certified by the Council's 151 officer. So it is actually untrue what he says. So, Chairman, that's why I am not prepared to accept these amendments, and I hope my group will support me in voting them against them.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. So, Councillor Dando, I'd like to give you the right to reply, please.
Councillor Myers seems to be trying to say something, but he's on mute.
Oh.
Could I ask for a clarification why Councillor Samuel got a right to reply and not just saying he rejected it, but I didn't? I mean, maybe we can.
So you would no, Councillor Myers. Councillor Samuel asked to speak. If you want to ask to speak, then I will bring you in before Councillor Dando.
Right. Well, I would have liked to have speak. I didn't think I was allowed to.
Here you are. Go for it now. Then go on. I don't want to start for you.
What I find so strange about this debate is, if residents are saying, why aren't their bins been emptied? And I raise the fact that it's about communication, why yet again, we can only have a debate which is knocking the national government and not responding to actual residents' queries, which we as a group are bringing to this council. So why is it that this administration and the Labour Party, which supposedly is not part of this administration, can't allow for a minute any comment to be made that then doesn't have to be twisted and turned into about Boris Johnson and how we don't recognise the work of council officers, when I specifically said right at the start we did. No, this is about deflection. COVID-19, we get quoted that I'm wrong for saying right at the start and throughout food parcels weren't delivered. I'm not saying that. I'm saying now that services are developing and coming back gradually, if we don't have another lockdown, why can't we know which are going to come back and which are not? We would never have been allowed in our administration to cut willy-nilly without consultation. And yet, under the cloak of COVID-19, it's entirely possible to mismanage the council's finances. And the small amount of government money we've supposedly had as a council, which I was told was 55 million. So there's quite a lot of money come into this authority. And just remember that if more money comes in, it's still coming from the people in taxes, because there isn't a magic money tree somewhere. We as a country have to be able to pay for the services from the country, and the government are doing their best to manage it. So I just find it complete hypocrisy, all these comments are trying to deflect. And those who are criticising me for raising with my group genuine residents' concerns, and they just want to grandstand yet again on national issues, should be totally ashamed of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. Thank you for those points. So, Councillor Dando, I will come back to you now.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's ironic, isn't it, on the day that the Conservative government suggests that they're going to spend £100 billion on Operation Moonshine, that Councillor Myers suggests that somehow there isn't a magic money tree. I think we are well past the magic money forest. But anyway, yes, you could well do that, Paul. If your motion had been written in the way that your moving speech was written, then perhaps we might not have been in this space. But your motion was absolutely attacking people and setting up an attack on people. And your moving speech and the seconding speech from Councillor May were much more conciliatory, but maybe you should reflect on your speech writing and write the motions in the same way. But I think our motion is attempting to be helpful. If the Lib Dem administration don't accept that they have a financial crisis, then so be it. But it's getting late, Chair, and we should at least try to finish one of these before 10 o'clock. So I'll finish there.
Thank you, Councillor Dando. So we're going to move to the vote on this amendment. Okay, this amendment is the Labour amendment that was emailed today, and it's got the bold text right at the end that this council makes clear to the government, etc. Yeah. So Councillor Samuels made it clear that his group is going to reject the amendment or to vote against the amendment. So I'll take that as the majority view at the moment. So those four, please, can they make it clear in the voting list? So we've got Councillor Hardman for, Councillor Dando, etc. Okay, thank you. For those people voting at the moment, I'm taking the against as the majority view, just so you don't all have to type in. I've got 5 at the moment, Joe. 4.
I agree.
I'm taking the majority view as against. So any abstentions, please? Just give a moment. So I'm assuming there are no abstentions coming in. So the majority is against that amendment. So therefore that amendment falls. The one that came forward, the substantive, remember, is the one that was the Liberal Democrat amended original motion. Okay, so now I think I've got no other new speakers. So what I do now is go back to Councillor Samuel now as the mover of the substantive that is amended for his summing up before we go to the vote on the substantive.
You do, but actually you give Councillor Myers an opportunity to have a final word before Richard sums up, as he was the mover of the original motion.
I put my name up to speak as well.
Did you? Sorry, Councillor Hedges, you go first, then we'll ask Councillor Myers to come in.
Okay, Chair. I've been a councillor for 21 years, and I've got to be honest, this is the worst motion I've ever been party to. This council worked hard as a family, and I will call it a family. I mean, I'm high risk, and the number of knocks on the door that I had during the lockdown was astonishing. I didn't need any food parcels or anything, but what Councillor Myers forgets is we've lost one of our own during this COVID-19, and he worked for the cleansing department. And I think this is not only a slap in the face to him, but it's a slap in the face to every single member of this council workforce and the way they worked. Now, I've been lucky enough to be to go to some of the cabinet pre-meetings, well, all the cabinet pre-meetings, and I know just how hard they've worked during this pandemic. They haven't been home resting with their feet up. They've been working bloody hard to make sure people are safe and they've got food and they've got all the other stuff that they need. Now, I'm sorry, but I think this is just Conservatives scrabbling for some political gain during a bad time, a pandemic, and it should never have come to this full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hedges. Councillor Myers, please.
Yes, so I won't totally reiterate what I've already said, but just in response to that last one, yet another sad attempt to totally misconstrue, muddy what I've been saying, and I think it's a slap in the face for our workers who are proud of the service they provide. And yes, they have worked extremely hard, and it's sad that they have to put up with complaints from our residents who expect a service and have been so patient, but they can't, the residents can't be communicated with properly. They just have to face cuts, stealth cuts hidden under the cloak of COVID-19. And I think we owe our staff more and we owe our residents more, and we should be totally honest as a council. And if we're not going to provide the full service, we should just admit it, that we're not going to go back and collect people's bins. We shouldn't put a sign up and say it's just because of virus and things like that. We should admit we're just going to cut it for them. But people are then going to be able to vote in the next election, and they'll be able to vote on the services that they expect from the council. And yes, they expect frozen meals to go to disadvantaged people, but they'd also like their bins emptying. And actually, some of the basics, as the years go by, you as an administration will be hardly judged on the quality of service that you've provided with the resources available. And no matter how much you whine, the point is, people deserve honest statements about what the services are now as they unfold. Nobody expects you to provide them if they can't. They just want to know where they stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I'm going to go back to the mover of the what is now the substantive, Councillor Samuel, and then we move to the vote on the substantive. So, Councillor Samuel.
Well, what a depressing litany of mistruths we've heard from the Conservative side tonight. All over the country, every public service has been affected by COVID in one way or the other. It may not have escaped your notice, but there are now millions of people waiting for NHS appointments. You cannot go to see your doctor in your doctor's surgeries. You cannot get a driving test. The list goes on. And that is the reality of COVID. That is what it has done to our way of life, our services, our economy, and our people's lives. And I feel really, really sorry for the people who have worked for years to put businesses together, to build homes for themselves. All of this is put under threat by this. For Councillor Myers to suggest that somehow there is some stealthy approach to reducing council services under the excuse of COVID, well, I'm not even sure that requires a reply, because I think it is such a disreputable thing to say. We are doing our best to keep the council services afloat. We've had to do them very differently, and it is our wish that as far as possible, we return to normality as quickly as possible. But I come back to the central point that I made in my earlier statement. The money is not there in the way that it was in February. And I don't know how many times one has to say that. The money is not there. And we are all going to have to get used to the fact that we are going to have to do something differently because there will be less money there. So, Chairman, I think there's probably no point in repeating that because it seems it's falling on deaf ears tonight. But let's move to the vote and let's get this painful process over.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. So we had the original motion that was amended as the Lib Dem amendment, which is now the substantive. That has been moved and seconded and summed up. We are now moving to the vote. I'm going to take the assumption that the majority are in favour of that. That has now been moved by Councillor Samuel. So those against, please, can you indicate how you will vote? Thank you. You're coming in. And those abstaining, could you make your position clear, please? So, Joe, I think I've got 10. Have I got 10? Have we got 10 against? No abstentions?
We've actually got 9 against, and one of those was an abstention. If you scroll back up.
Oh yes, yes. You're quite right. I can
so
see
we
it there.
have we have 9 against and 1 abstention, so it's therefore carried.
Therefore carried. Thank you.
Chair, can I just say I've been pressing my thing, but doesn't seem to be working. I'm voting against.
Okay. So that's 10 against. Thank you. 1 abstention.
10 against. Okay. I'll take that as the recorded vote. Thank you. That's carried. We move now. I'd like to move straight into the next item. Does anyone object to that, or do we want another break? Should we move on? Let's move on. Okay. Item 11.
I think Councillor Jackson indicated that she wanted a very small comfort break.
Is she?
Yeah, it's important to take a break, Chair.
Okay, let's take it. Yeah, let's take a break. 5 minutes again. It is now 20:49. 20:54. Thank you. Mute if you can. Mike, are we okay to go? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think it looks like a lot of you are back, so let's crack on. So, item 11, Lib Dem motion on local electricity bill. I've got Councillor Singleton to move, please. Is he there?
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair. In March 2019, when I and perhaps a number of others of today's members were still in our political nappies, the Council, to its great credit, came together in a cross-party basis and declared a climate emergency. In July this year, we again united, at the behest of my colleague, Councillor Jess David, to declare an ecological emergency. In the interim, in October last year, the Council received a climate emergency progress report, which laid out in stark detail the sheer scale of the challenges we face as we address our committed ambition to become zero carbon by 2030. A critical factor in our success in achieving that ambition will be a huge increase in the installation and commissioning of clean, renewable energy across the district. Over the next 10 years, we need to bring on stream at least 10 times as much as has been achieved over the whole of the last 10 years. The ambition is bracing, but also massively exciting, offering fantastic opportunities for our economy and for our communities. The area that Baines now covers has a proud and noble history of local electricity generation. In 1889, at the leading edge of the curve, the Keynsham Electric Supply Company was founded and generated some at least of its power from a hydro scheme on the River Chew. Characteristically, on northeast Somerset's pioneering coattails, Bath followed. And in 1890 came the City of Bath Electric Light Co. And we have gone from strength to strength ever since. Today, we have a vibrant, creative, and highly successful community energy sector locally. Some 10 years ago, with encouragement from the Council, Bath and West Community Energy was established and has become a recognised national leader. It has been joined by Chelwood Community Energy, Keynsham Community Energy, Energy Efficient Widcombe, Zero Carbon Compton, and other groups and parish councils who are setting an example and taking a lead. The school's programme Energy Sparks, which first saw the light of day within Transition Bath, has now taken wing and become a much respected and effective national charity. But the prospects of our success in generating the green energy we require face a major obstacle. The current electricity generation and supply market in this country, unlike others across Europe and elsewhere in the world, is structurally designed for and dominated by a small number of major international corporate players. New locally focused generators face huge structural and legal barriers, which in effect prevent them from selling local energy to local people and businesses. The costs of entry to the system are set prohibitively high and lead to massive inefficiencies and waste, as well as serving to suppress effective market competition, favouring an oligopoly of the established few at the expense of their many customers. The local electricity bill, to which I'm proposing we as a council commit our support this evening, is designed to tackle this market failure. The bill, which reaches its second reading in the Commons later this week, is designed to allow local electricity producers, be they commercial, council, or community-owned, to enter the market and operate competitively without disproportionate barriers to entry. The bill already has the support of 198 MPs from all parties, and I'm delighted that Bath MP Vera Hobhouse is one of its sponsors. A growing list of councils, organisations, and enlightened individuals are lending it their support because they can see, surely, that there is a better way of doing things. If the bill becomes law, there will be immediate and far-reaching benefits for our communities and our residents.
1 minute.
We can expect the change to unleash and empower local entrepreneurship in support of green renewal and economic regeneration. It will pave the way for widespread new local generation schemes, which, by allowing producers to sell to local customers at prices that work for both parties, we'll keep money within our communities, make it easier to tackle the blight of fuel poverty, and create new green jobs. Through community-owned projects, it will enhance local fabric, strengthen local social capital, and increase energy resilience across Baines for the future. I commend the motion to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Singleton. I think I've got Councillor Barrett-Pankania to second. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is he there? Barrett, we can't hear you. No, Barrett, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you.
You can now, can't you?
No, we can now, yeah.
Well done. Thank you, Chair. So we have seen the devastation brought around the whole world by the current coronavirus pandemic. And in terms of scale and magnitude, this is just a dress rehearsal compared to the threats posed to the well-being of planetary health from climate change. Climate change brought about by man-made global warming is the biggest global threat of the 21st century. In our 2009 report, Lancet report, we said the effects of climate change on health will put the lives and well-being of billions of people at risk. Furthermore, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, you may remember, their report says, amongst other things, we should take measures to use less fossil fuel, eat less meat and dairy products, reduce deforestation. Thus, we must do all we can to reduce our carbon footprint. It is important, it is urgent, it is crucial for our future generations, as well as for planetary sustainability. So, enabling local, small-scale solar electricity generators to be able to harness energy from the sun will be of benefit to the local economy. It also has the potential to reduce fuel poverty and develop a cohesive, locally resilient society. The ability to generate small-scale electricity will contribute towards the reduction in carbon footprints. It is one small step towards a more sustainable planet. So finally, as our Councillor Grant Johnson said earlier in the council meeting today, let us continue with the run on unanimous support. I seek the support of all elected members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Now I've got Councillors Warren, Pritchard, Evans and May. So Councillor Warren first.
Hi, I'll speak very briefly just to emphasise how important our support for the local electricity bill is. The climate emergency report to this council last October detailed the need to increase our renewable generation by more than 10 times. Community energy schemes in particular are a way of ensuring the benefits of infrastructure with local visual impacts like wind turbines and solar arrays are felt by the local communities most affected. They keep the money circulating and provide jobs and benefits in the local community rather than being sent away to a large national or multinational company headquarters. It's essential that electricity markets are restructured in such a way as to provide improved support for such schemes. I wholeheartedly support the motion, which reflects the right direction of travel to bring about a green renewal in Bath and North East Somerset and nationwide.
Thanks, Councillor Warren. Thank you very much. Councillor Pritchard, next on my list.
Yes, I do have grave reservations with regard to supporting the local electricity bill and Power for People campaign. It calls for an increase in the provision of locally generated renewable electricity, and the interpretation of that could lead to an unwarranted proliferation of solar and wind farms in rural sites, most likely in sensitive areas like the Chew Valley. Let me give you the example of the 12-acre solar site at Hunt Street that was sold to us, that said that it would have no big interruption on the landscape. It would allow sheep to graze in between the panels. We were told a romantic idea, there'd be lambs skipping between the panels. Well, we're all very beautiful. It's an absolute eyesore. It's hated locally. They've had to build a separate detached building to collect the generated electricity, which amounts to a sizable bungalow that's built in Greenbelt. It's Greenbelt Grade 1 agricultural land, lost for 25 years. You're opening the floodgates to developments of wind farms on the hills of Breach Hill above Chewstoke, spilling over into Nempdip Thrubwell. This is 1950s unspoilt agricultural land that I doubt any of you Bathonians have ever visited. And it's so sensitive to open the floodgates on a campaign of this kind, where you'll have no control. When you're doing planning in Bath, I've been on planning site visits where you look at a prospective development from all the vantage points all in around Bath to see if it would interrupt the skyline. And yet you would open the floodgates here to windmills all around on the foothills of the Mendip Hills without any control if this became legislation. And that's what you're supporting. I can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. So, Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to disagree with my esteemed colleague, Vic. I don't usually, but there's a lot I like about this proposal. It's a private member's bill, which was the main sponsor was a Conservative MP, Peter Aldous, the Conservative MP for Waveney, I noticed. It's opening up to competition, which I think is a good thing. Monopoly and oligarchy, whether private or public, are one of the worst blights on any society. It's also local, which I think is wonderful. I'm very much in favour of things like Cameron's local volunteer ideas. I think energy and innovation can come from local sources. I think Councillor Pritchard's worries, I hope, will be answered through the planning system. I can't see that this proposal sets up a coach and horses to be driven through all planning considerations. Ugly and inappropriate developments can still certainly be resisted. So this one will have my vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I've got Councillor May, then Moss. So May first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping this was going to be a unanimous vote in support, and I want to congratulate Councillor Singleton on the way he presented the item this evening. The reality is the world has changed, and even my small parishes that I represent want to embrace climate emergency and the ecological emergency. And I think as a council, it's nice to have one item where we don't have silly politics played, and we actually say this will be good for society moving forward. So I fully support this item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor May. So Councillor Moss, then Hurst, please.
Thank you. Labour Group's more than happy to support this. It is a cross-party motion in the Commons. One of my declarations of interest at the beginning of the meeting was that I'm chair of the board of directors of Radstock and Westfield Big Local. We're a community interest company, and one of the things we are considering, and we've had discussions with Bath and West Community Energy, is about investing in renewable energy. And the fact that a relatively small local regeneration company can consider that is good. The biggest barrier, of course, to small companies investing is the fact that the larger, the large providers, the large suppliers, the large distributors don't like that and do all they can to block that. And I'd say to Vic as well, and I understand his concerns about scarring the landscape. Personally, I'd be more worried about the current planning reforms or proposed planning reforms doing that. I have to say, and if current planning legislation is in place, then the ability to scar landscape would be resisted and restricted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moss. I've only got two speakers. I'd like you to be brief, please. Hurst and Appleyard. Councillor Hurst, please.
Yeah, I want to strongly support the motion. I think it's absolutely the right direction to travel. Absolutely, we have to prioritise the climate emergency and tackle the real challenge of that. We just have to listen to our young people, my daughter, the people who go to the, well, when the school strikes were happening, the school strike marches. We don't have a choice. We have to radically change what we're doing and to really make a step change in the way that we deal with carbon. And so we have to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. As Councillor Appleyard, then I'll be coming back to you, Councillor Singleton. Councillor Appleyard.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect Councillor Pritchard's concerns are more about the management of that solar site as opposed to the effectiveness of it is. And if it's agricultural, I mean, surely agriculture is actually farming. And if you're growing crops in there, you rely on the sunshine coming down. All we're doing is actually not letting it get to the beetroot. We're actually sort of harvesting it for our use. So I think it's good. In fact, I don't think we go far enough on the solar. I mean, we should be looking at places like our park and rides and things like that to sort of bring those sort of things in there. So I mean, I'm all for this.
Thank you, Councillor Appleyard. Stay silent, but Councillor Pritchard, I see you getting all excited there. I'm going to move into Councillor Singleton for him to sum up. Back to you, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks everyone for thoughtful and thought-provoking ideas. It's clear that this is an idea which has touched many of us. And at heart, it's a motion that matters. It really matters. And that's not primarily for the economic or social reasons that I laid out earlier. And it's not even for the unimpeachable climate and environmental case made so eloquently by Councillor Bharat Pankhania. It matters because it's an opportunity for us to do something real and positive for the legacy we leave our children and those who follow us. It's quite simply the right thing to do. And it's on that basis that I ask you please to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Singleton. Thank you for that. So we'll move to the vote now. So from the debate, there's a clear majority for. So I'm going to ask for those who are against, please, to show their view. And at the same time, are there any abstentions, please? So I've got one against at the moment, Joe, and one abstention.
Yep.
Just give it a moment. So on that basis, that's clearly carried.
Yes.
So that motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Item 12 on the agenda. I'm moving on quickly. Item 12 on the agenda. There is nothing notified. And therefore, I'd like to inform you all that the meeting is closed. Thank you for your patience and interest and some very interesting debates. Thank you. Good night.